Welcome back to Wickerson Studios. My name is Michael Wickerson and I'm working for MGSM. This will be the second video that will be coincide with the series of the master scripts I'm covering in the course. I will not cover everything here, but I do want to talk about the params, and we'll call this section 2, and it will be params input. Basically, I've got a pretty long strip I want to get over, but it's fairly repetitive, so it should be easy enough to get an appreciation for what's happening. Now, I'm going to jump in here to start. We'll call this 002 params input, and I'm not going to talk in detail about the number slider and the panel tool, which is two of the most common functions. I'll show a lot of tricks within the course of how to get a panel tool up and running, how to turn it into a snippet tool directly, how to make it into a panel tool for text, how to change the number slider and set it with greater than, less than, do a bunch of things with it, run through animations, deal with wire displays on the panel tool as well, and shortcuts for setting the panel tool, which I talked about. I'm not going to spend too much time on the booleans, but you're going to want to know numbers and how to input them, change them from rational to integers. With certain decimal places, you're certainly going to want to learn how to use strings to the panel tool and booleans to true and false, which we'll cover in the course. Double-clicking your MD slider is pretty interesting to set domains. That's a little trick, and as you get into the inputs and start playing around with this, what I've done is I've pulled in something fairly simple. One thing I'll suggest is on any of these scripts that you end up getting, large or small, you want to right-click and hit the ungroup, so you can actually group it when you're done again, but at least you won't get jumbled up over grouping and having a hard time moving things around. So I'm going to jump back. We'll end up in that top view with the image sampler later, but right now I just want to see what I've brought in here as a sphere. I think it's fairly large. We'll put it on objects, so as I click them, they kind of select. I've got another quad sphere here and a sphere here, and I've set a pretty big radius on there. You can start to appreciate the parametric quality of the things here. I'm evaluating a reparameterized surface to find points within there, to actually find a plane and a frame within there, and a point normal on there, UV directions on there, and then what you want to do with quad spheres, which are pretty nice because they're 4 surfaces, kind of like a cube. You can deconstruct the breadth and you can take them apart and find evaluating surface. So you go from having 1 evaluated surface from a sphere over to 6 surfaces. And I play around with that a little bit, and then I take it through a point, evaluating it instead of using a number slider like I did on this one, where I can put a number slider through a reparameterized surface all over any point I want. You can use multiple number sliders for that. The one trick that I do talk about is double-clicking on here and setting your domain and making sure it matches the domain of what you're actually putting in. We'll cover that in detail as well. What happens here with this one is I've actually used, instead of a MD slider, which is kind of like setting the T parameter on curve, we're actually using surfaces, so we're able to use a UV coordinate system for those. So you can end up building some pretty interesting geometries playing through here. So the sample file is very nice to play with. If you want to take something that you can actually preview and not have this trouble that I'm having with my number slider, you can just click on here, have everything come up, choosing your preferences for your colors, and there you can see what happens when that one's actually selected. But I'm going to leave that one off right now because I want to see everything I'm working on. Another thing is use a value list. Double click on there and learn how to set your value list to certain qualities within a text, and then roll through those items. And you see as I run down through selecting different ones here, there's actually quite a few setups. If you want to do a drop down or a sequence value, you can pull it through there. Color swatches we'll talk about a little bit more in detail. And you can click to set those color swatches and move them into any color range that you actually want. Things are a little slow here, but I'll just leave it in blue there. I will cover left double click on graph mappers, which are absolutely fantastic, and we will be focusing a lot on the maths within these scripts. And I will cover this once again in detail, but I want you to understand that there are a variety of graph types that you don't have to go into this range and use the expression node. You can actually use a very cool thing, the graph mapper itself. You can set its ranges and its domains within it, very similar to the MD slider. You can actually have presets as you come down here to your graph types, parabolas, and change around the forms of whatever you end up wanting to do to the graph. And what I've ended up doing is making an interpolated line from these points. So I'm going to make that to visualize, and you can see that curve that's now a parabola. I can take that through and play with that in many different ways as I go. And I've really just graphed out an x-coordinate through a range and interpolated those points. So if I take this one and actually show you the points that are being generated from those, preview on, I can actually play with manipulating those very similar here as to what's being manipulated within the framework, which is very nice. And then you can go in, you can choose your steps to have a more in-depth curve. We're going to play around a lot in the maths doing this, and we can change our domains to start and finish to where we want it to start and where we want it to end. So you can have a lot of curve control just by using the graph mapper through a range series and then dealing with interpolating curves. And I do get thrilled by an awful lot of that stuff. But we'll cover a lot of those inputs and kind of put those into practice as we go. I'm going to take them and put them in preview off. I am going to group them again. And then I wanted to come down and have an appreciation in top view for what I think is a very interesting tool. I'm just going to jump down here and grab maybe one of these to start. And it's bounced off the page for a second. Let me just right-click here and hit. Actually, if you select one and you're in the group, and that's why I suggest ungrouping, select one, and you can just go outside and you hit preview on. You'll see I actually have a surface that's dictated by this actual figure that's in the image sampler, which is pretty interesting. And I've actually gone so far to do something that Daniel Christev, I have to give credit to. He really has made a wonderful script for using the graph mapper well. And he has a great tutorial online, which I would suggest doing. And whenever you're going to use the image sampler throughout this, I would suggest using this and bringing your image in the Grasshopper beforehand. And with image, this should say image, not Engage, import path, create a bounding box around it. And what this ends up doing is making a very synced up, coordinated file on your drive here that you've brought in. And you can do this by following a path and just clicking here and selecting one path and finding it on your computer. The same way as you build importing that image in and putting a bounding box around it and deconstructing the breadth, setting the dimensions to that and doing a little bit of math tucked in here, reducing to an integer and doing a 1 over x. It's just an amazing mathematical perfection that Daniel Christev's come up with, and I use it now. So whenever, instead of people usually bring this in and then fudge with the ranges and try and get it so they have to like tile it, they have to change it, they have to think of it square. Well, everything works out perfectly in the system in a sense of bounds of 0 to 1 that you can take it through the maths again in the z direction. Pretty interesting seeing how that runs into that rectangle. And now I've managed to make a surface, and actually you can appreciate this over in perspective view. I've made a surface from points, and if you want to download the Mesh from Points tool, which is in Mesh Edit, I think, or just Mesh from Points, you see that I've actually created a mesh right here. So you've got a mesh that coincides with this one, and I'll just take off the whole view so you can see this one, and you can see this one. Actually, I think I have to click it here. So you're seeing the mesh with lines, and if you're not seeing the mesh lines, you're going to want to go into display and make sure you're clicking preview mesh edges on, and then you can see a nice nerve surface that mimics that surface as well. We're going to be using that a lot of times, but really beautiful, quick demo. And of course, I'm handing it to you off of Daniel Christev, and since I'm working with him on other projects, I think he won't mind. But I do want to highlight this real math trick and everything back here that most people come in and fight with the image sampler and don't know what to do with it with building rectangle. But just take a little bit of time to script something that really registers everything. It allows things to expand. You're not stuck here sliding around the sample sizes of what you want to do. You're actually able to bring in the image, not worry about that, put it to a bounding box and use that and deconstruct it and use the U and V dimensions in that with a little bit of math to actually make sure that it goes all the way to the crisp edge of whatever image you have and keeps everything kind of working out similarly and right to the edge. So very nice system. The next script that I run, and I'm just going to take this one and turn this one. Actually, I don't want to turn it all off. I'm just going to turn the preview off. He goes back in, and I think he does the same thing again. And the only change that I did here was he ended up putting circles at the end of it. So you end up getting a pretty nice perforated holes that if you wanted to take that and make that a sheet, he's brought in a little bit of the maths to say, okay, what happens when we change the size of those circles? And really nice little technique. If you go in here and you'll see it's kind of making a different image and making different visuals. Now there's a lot of little circles that have to change, and there's a good chance you'll crash your computer if you do too big a thing, but making it parametric is really kind of nice. And then the final example, he's gone so far to brought some logic into it, which I just think is outstanding. Preview off, comes in here, let's take this object and put that preview on. He's actually gone in and kept the same script again, but he wrote in a little bit within an expression node that if x is greater than y, and he sets a y parameter on here, he can make that whole thing of a called pattern disappear. So when you're looking at something like this, as you go from the extreme, let's go from 0 all the way here. Let's plug that one in, and you'll see that geometry is, it's taking a second to think, is allowing everything through, because at no point is x not greater than y. But if I go in here and hit edit and bring that one all the way up to 1, it's going to edit out everything, and you're not going to end up with anything. So if we grab a little edit and slide this one back to something in the middle, it's going to decide which circles radius are bigger or smaller, and you're losing partially some of your image. But a really nice technique for kind of abstracting the forms that you're doing. Once again, all credit to Daniel Christev, like so much of the work I'm doing with him. Really nice. This will be a fun demo to go over and kind of pick apart and try and get everything done correctly. I'm going to select everything, probably take it off, and actually, just to be safe, take it to disable. I'm going to grab everything again in here, and I'm just going to group and have that pattern ready to go. So that's a fast overview. I'm a little frazzled getting school ready. I've got to prepare all these things. These are just backup files for the tutorials that I'll actually be doing alongside people with the master scripts. And the master scripts that I compiled, this may be a snippet that pulls from many people online that have been so inspirational. The master scripts themselves, if I go in here and hit open and jump back into MGSM master scripts, what I'm working off of is just this first one, and I'll open the recovery file. Lots of plugins that are associated with this, but you can see this entire script where we've done the first one, we've done the second section. We're going to keep plugging through here and do about 20 in each master script section and get through all 60. So I hope that makes sense. Sorry it's a little chaotic, but this is the beginnings of it, and I just want to kind of settle into how much do I want to offer in these videos as an overview, and how much do I want to require people to actually want to take the course and get into the full details of it. So thanks again for watching, and talk to you soon. I'm trying to get these videos to around 10 minutes.